Hi, this is Irving Steele, your host of Local Issues, and here today we continue the segment of highlighting regional, spiritual, and religious leaders throughout Southeastern Connecticut. We're very lucky and grateful to have a special guest in the rabbi from the temple here in Waterford, Connecticut. So Rabbi Marc, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
That's great, and we're really excited to have you here. I understand that you moved here from Ohio, is that correct?
Yeah, I lived most of my adult life in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I've been almost 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what brought you to Connecticut? Was it the temple?
Yep, Temple Emanu-El. The pulpit came open there, and I am lucky enough to have come here to serve this beautiful Jewish community.
Okay. And over those 8 years, have you seen specific issues and things arising that are maybe a little different from Ohio?
No, I don't think so. I think the challenges for not only the Jewish community but all faith communities is in some respects is the same. We all struggle with decreasing engagement, so that's a big part of it. And then we all struggled with the pandemic for sure.
Mm-hmm. That was a challenging time for everybody.
Yeah, very challenging. And I understand that was the catalyst for this show as well. And I think we rose to meet that challenge, and I think there's a robust recovery from that as well that we're seeing now. So I'm very uplifted by that.
That's great. I'm really curious too, roughly, what are the numbers for the Jewish community in Southeastern Connecticut? Do you have a rough idea, or for your temple, about how many people are attending?
Yeah, I don't think that we have a handle on, I can't cite for you how many people down to a person are here in Southeastern Connecticut. I will say that, the Jewish population goes with the other demographic trends. So at least in Southeastern Connecticut, if there's an overall decrease in population, there's going to be some Jews moving out of the area too. And if there's an increase in the population, there are going to be a few Jews in that mix as well. Mm-hmm. And that all is to say that I think that the Jewish population in Southeastern Connecticut is as stable as any other demographic in Southeastern Connecticut. I think we're pretty stable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And one thing that obviously is on a lot of people's minds, I'm sure, in your community as well as communities all throughout Connecticut and America and the whole world right now, is just kind of what's taking place in Israel. And really curious of how you're handling this situation as a religious leader in the community, where it is really becoming very divisive, and people who used to be neighbors, used to be friends, used to be collaborating, working towards peace, are now finding themselves in a predicament. So I'm curious, just how are you handling all of that right now as the leader of this community in Southeastern Connecticut?
Yeah, well, let me say that what happened on October 7th was devastating to the Jewish community. Certainly it was devastating to Israelis in the state of Israel. A state that was created largely for the safety of Jews showed its vulnerability. And that crisis will carry on for some time, even if the immediate threats are resolved. So this is deeply felt. It's also very deeply felt here in this community. We have people in our Jewish community here who have direct links to family members there. So as well as it being something that's happened to our people, it's also happened to our families. Mm-hmm. And it's not so far removed from any of us. Mm-hmm. So I think that one thing it's important for just general people in our community to realize is just how deeply that it has affected every single Jew in Southeastern Connecticut, whether they have family there or not. So how are we dealing with that as a community? We try to be there for each other as much as possible.
What does that mean?
Well, one of the kind of daily routines now, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do, I used to take a look at the New York Times. It's not the New York Times that I look at first thing in the morning anymore. Now it's the Times of Israel.
Okay.
And I'd say that's true for a large majority of Jews now, that the first thing that we're doing in the morning and the last thing that we're doing in the evening is checking what is going on there. And so our level of involvement in the happenings in the state of Israel has really been amped up.
Does that ever sometimes feel too much or overbearing of knowing all the details every single day, morning, night? Does that ever feel too much, or you're able to handle it?
Oh, it feels too much most of the time because of the gravity of what's going on there. And, we also see that, just not as Jewish people, we also see that as Americans, how deeply involved our government is in trying to help resolve some of the issues there, trying to keep the situation from growing larger and becoming an international situation.
Which just seems like day by day,
yeah,
it's becoming a little bit larger, unfortunately.
There is that potential.
Yeah.
We look at what's going on at the northern border of Israel and Lebanon with Hezbollah. We look at what is going on with the Houthis. So there is that very real potential. It often feels like it is too much. But one of the things that I said on October 7th is that we must, particularly for Jews, we must remain engaged. And we must be in tune to every little detail. And the reason is because we are witnesses. And we must be witnesses. If for no other reason that we do our best as human beings, as Jews, as community members, to try and make sure that all the things that we are doing here in our community or out in the world are creating structures that prevent things like this from happening again. When the Holocaust was over, one of the things that we said was never again. But we've never been able to make never again a reality. And so we keep having things going on in the world that are frankly intolerable. And the only way that we will ever find a way out is by being witnesses to the things that are going on and finding ways to prevent them from happening again. We can't do it if we're not witnesses.
And the never again element and working to prevent such instances in the future, what thoughts and ideas do you have regarding that?
Well, for us American Jews, it can seem a little remote. It can seem as if, I'm a Jew, but I'm not an Israeli. What effect can I really have? I'm an American, not an Israeli. What effect can I have? But we happen to live in one of the most powerful nations in the world, and Americans do have influence. Jewish Americans do have influence. Largely the Jews who live here are not people who can go to Israel and vote, but we can have an impact. And the way that we have an impact is by talking amongst ourselves and amongst our representatives in Washington and being in touch with them and knowing, explaining to them how we feel and the things that we expect from them and how they can be helpful to us, and leveraging their experience and know-how in solving these very complicated foreign policy issues and building bridges to peace. There are ways to do that. I am confident, and I'm also confident that our president is dedicated to that, that our Secretary of State is dedicated to that, that our representatives in Congress here, Congressman Courtney and Senators Murphy and Blumenthal, they are in tune with these things, and our influence can be to make them aware of our issues and to work with them to solve these problems that are good for Americans and good for the Jewish people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's been impressive for some of these political leaders. It seems that they've been attending different events, they've been reaching out and trying to support some kind of global diplomacy that will eventually lead, hopefully, to more peace, more understanding between all these different groups of people.
Yes.
And it's also interesting that, at least for me, to see Qatar kind of coming out in the world as one of the countries really trying to help with a lot of the negotiations. And I never imagined that they would be in such an important role right now to help alleviate some of these concerns going on.
Yeah, I think that is some of the art of foreign policy, is that is building those relationships over time. Maybe sometimes not with people that necessarily you would want to, but that you recognize how it might have a future potential to help in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Qataris are right now. They are able to have a conversation that maybe we can't have ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's very important.
Mm-hmm. And I remember I was in Israel in 2007 and just crossing the border into Jordan at that time. There were tanks all across the border, lots of military all across the border. But then one thing I noticed after spending about a week in Jordan is really, at the end of the day, I felt like a lot more similarities between different groups of people as opposed to a lot of differences. And I just was really shocked by that, seeing it with my own eyes. I was so grateful for that opportunity. And then also in Israel, seeing in a spot where there was a synagogue, a church, and a mosque, basically all on top of each other.
Yeah.
That I guess in the ideal, perfect world, we would be able to have this harmony between different religions and be able to live in peace.
I think that one of the tragedies is that terrorism makes it seem as if the whole world is on fire, when in fact there are lots of examples, just like you spoke about, your own personal example. There are lots of places in Israel where Jews, Palestinian Israelis, Druze, Bedouins get along and live next to each other in peace. And that our challenge is, one, not to get too sucked into the idea that the whole world is on fire. But then once we've realized that the whole world is not on fire, to see those opportunities where we can build bridges of understanding towards other people, and realize that we have a whole lot more in common than we have in what divides us, right? One of the groups that I am very proud to have just some knowledge of is a friend of mine, Rabbi Or Zohar, who has visited us 3 times in Waterford. He is a rabbi in the Galilee, and he runs an organization called the Spirit of the Galilee. And he does exactly this kind of work, is bringing together people who come from different faith backgrounds, and brings them together to celebrate their commonalities and work for a shared society. There are many, many other examples of that same work going on in Israel. And just as I support fighting against terrorism, I also join in the fight to uplift those organizations in Israel that are playing a very long game and looking forward to a different time when our commonalities will win out and our differences will shrink into the background.
And I think that's true, that if you're able to focus on these different spots where there's opportunities to shrink the problems, that's huge. That I recently saw a contact of mine, he's in Chicago, he's Jewish, he's an investor, and one of his close friends is Muslim, he's Arab, and they had an open discourse online talking about their friendship, their relationship, how much they mean to one another. And I view that, sure, maybe it's just 2 people, but if we can continue to have more conversations and communication, even between people who maybe thought they were enemies their entire lives, maybe these are small baby steps towards a little bit more understanding, a little bit more communication and peace.
Yeah. This isn't to say that there aren't some very real security issues, and I'm sure there are probably some people who are listening to us and thinking, wow, these folks, they're really Pollyannish. But there has to be a balance there. It can't be all about the terrible things that are going on. We have to uplift people who are working very hard to build those bridges of understanding. So.
Great. And I know we're going from the large view maybe down to a lot smaller, more focused. With the time that we have remaining, really curious if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your own spiritual journey and how you became a rabbi.
Well, it's a very a long story. We don't have time for the whole thing.
Of course.
But there's a whole nother Marc Ekstrand before I became Rabbi Marc Ekstrand. And I was an engineer. I worked in the steel industry for almost 20 years. And I worked for a very large steel company just north of Cincinnati, my final stop. And I guess the journey for me really started in working in the steel mill. And what I found out about myself is that I really enjoyed the mentoring, the teaching, the listening, the people relationships. The engineering excited me too, and the steelmaking excited me tremendously. But it was really the people that became much more my love about the job. At the same time, I had a growing family and really reconnected very deeply with my Jewish-ness. And those 2 things really came together for me. The wanting to be in relationship with people and my Judaism. And I just said, okay, well, maybe there's a different path for me. And that's when I moved towards the rabbinate and away from the steel career. But I think it was a whole lot less of a jump than people imagine. It was actually quite seamless.
Still takes a lot of courage to go from working in the steel industry to following
Yeah,
spiritual
it
leader
does.
path?
It certainly does. And it is a huge change in the way I live my life, and certainly a change in the things that I focus on a daily basis.
What would you advise to people who are maybe interested in pursuing more spirituality or learning more about maybe their Jewishness, as you mentioned, or other religions that maybe they're considering or pursuing?
So don't do what I did. It's extreme. It is an extreme thing to do in your 40s to change from one career and go to a completely different kind of career.
Especially with a growing family.
Yeah, with a growing family. Be careful about that step. And also that you don't have to go as far as I did. That bringing more spirituality into your life doesn't have to involve such a radical change. It can be small things. It can be getting in touch with your attentiveness to your waking moments, setting your intention for the day. There are lots of religious traditions where there are prayers that are outlined for us in these waking moments. And also when we go to bed at night, start there. Bring spirituality to your daily life before you go radical. Okay, there's lots of
baby
ways
steps,
to do that.
one step at a time.
And the other thing I would say is that most of what we do at Temple Emanu-El and a lot of Jewish congregations, communities, is to be in community with one another. It's about being in relationships, right? As I said when we opened, that a lot of faith communities have the same challenge, and that is people dissociating from their faith communities.
So I'm curious, what are you guys trying to do to have more engagement? I think I heard maybe you had some guitars playing, trying to incorporate music. What are these things to get that engagement?
You know what? It's not the guitars or the music. It's not the gimmicks. It's about being radically welcoming, audaciously hospitable, welcoming everyone who comes in the door, and beyond welcoming them, being in relationship with them. Okay? And people have, since the pandemic, more people have sought us out, mostly because they're looking for a sense of community. That's what they're looking for.
And it's something so many people missed during the pandemic when everything was closed.
Right. So it's good for us as a congregation that people are doing that. And I think it's good for the general community that there are these places in our community where people can just come together to be together. Now, we do it in a distinctly Jewish way, but there are these other places in community too. Just because you happen to not be Jewish and maybe you're Christian or maybe you're something else, seek those places out that maybe you had abandoned previously. They're there for you, right? We're here for you. If you want to be in community, just come walk in the door. We're here for you.
That's great. And also I believe that the temple does a lot with and for the community as well, that there's different groups and organizations, whether there's food drives. Do you have any activities you want to highlight?
Yeah, there's quite a few. We have a lot of our members get involved in many important community projects. I'm on the board of the Homeless Hospitality Center in New London. They're doing excellent work there. Many of our congregants volunteer there. We do a lot of volunteering with the Meal Center in New London, and also Safe Futures, clothing drives and food drives, and I'm very proud of our involvement as a congregation in all these different ways. That is probably one of the things I'm most proud of about our congregation is how we really get out there and try to do what we're commanded to do, and that's repair the world that we live in, make it a better place, not just for us, but for everybody.
And there's a special saying for doing good in the community, right?
Yeah, tikkun olam. It means repairing the world. Right?
Great. And what would you advise for people maybe in our community, some of our viewers who are very passionate about kind of what's going on in the world right now? How can they be an ally or support and try and push towards peace?
I think the most important thing is to learn as much as you can about the conflict. It's not just a headline. It's not just the latest thing that has happened. The history of this conflict goes back over 100 years, and it's very complicated. It's not something that you can teach somebody about in an hour. So I encourage people to really engage deeply in trying to understand the complicated history, because without the complicated history, you cannot fathom what the solutions could be. At the same time, be aware of the people right here in our community. And as I said, there's a lot of people who are really hurting right now, not only because of what happened on October 7th, not only because of what is going on right now, but because of rising anti-Semitism here in the United States. There are a lot of very nervous Jews around. And I should also say that I have great empathy for our Muslim neighbors. They are dealing with the same sort of thing, rising Islamophobia. Wherever we come from, we have to resist the temptation of othering anyone, right? Whether it's a Jew, whether it's a Muslim, whether it is somebody of Hispanic origins, Hindu, it does not matter. Resisting any temptation to other someone else. Be curious about your neighbors and engage with them. Find out about them, right? Don't assume things about them. And work for ways that you can build relationships with people regardless of where they come from and what they look like. That's the important thing. And by doing that, then we squash something very ugly, which is hate. And if we can work towards eliminating hate and growing understanding through personal relationships that we have with people, that will get us to a far better place.
Great. Eliminate hate and grow understanding. Thank you, Rabbi, so much for your time today, and hopefully our viewers will get a lot out of this. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me.